Hello guys, I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get myself sorted. Did did plan to start at 12:30, but then my computer decided to do some software thing and then start rebooting. So here I am. I'm just sorry it's late, so I hope that you are still available, whoever had planned to listen. So today is going to be all about addictions. I've not really kind of planned this session that much because I think that as we talk about it, hopefully some people will ask some questions and it will kind of evolve quite organically. So apologies also for the scenery today. The I'm in my lovely half decorated bedroom. This is the old lady's wallpaper. Um, I'm just having to use this room today because downstairs is a mess because of all the stuff going on with the house. And it's probably the warmest room in the house as well, being that it's snowing outside. So that's why I'm wearing my Christmas jumper. Hey ho, right, let's get started. So, first I'll just tell you a bit about what an addiction is, but you probably know that. And those of you that are listening to this because you're interested in that, it might be that you have an addiction yourself. So, I'd say the most common forms of addiction that people know about are drugs and alcohol. But addictions can be in any form. So it's anything where you're overindulging and it gives you pleasure. So for somebody that could be chocolate. I know it sounds silly, but some people are addicted to chocolate. Um, a good example of a really sort of new common addiction is social media and specifically screens. So young people now are addicted to screens because they're overindulging every single day. And the reason once something becomes an addiction, is it's taking away from the normal sort of needs, your normal emotional needs and things that you require as a human being. It's taking away from that. So you're getting more of the addiction, but that's creating a lack of something else in your life. So it's almost like it's trying to replace something. So I just wanted to talk to you about, firstly, about addiction. And there's a principle which I want to share with you that the Human Givens came up with, which is called the carrot stick principle. And that is kind of a bit of it'll give you a bit more of an explanation of addictions. So, as I've already said, I'm just looking back to my notes here. I've already said if you overindulge in anything, it results in an interference of needs. And specifically, there I'm talking about emotional needs, which I will come to in a moment. And by doing that, overindulging, you're reducing the likelihood of important needs being met in a balanced way. So it's detrimental to other areas of your life, whether you are aware of that or not. And so needs being met, specifically emotional needs not being met, make you more vulnerable to addiction. So if you don't currently have an addiction, but you can identify areas or needs not being met, that needs to be addressed, because you're not just vulnerable to addiction at that point, but you're vulnerable to absolutely anything. So it can be depression, anxiety, addiction, phobia, all sorts of things. So just bear in mind that when I'm talking about these emotional needs, you need to be looking at your own life and figuring out where you could work on these to avoid becoming poorly. So and it's just also useful to point out here that the first sort of step towards overcoming an addiction is recognizing it. So some people will go for years and years and not get better because they don't recognize that it's a problem, whereas some people can have one for a very short amount of time but actually overcome it quicker because they have recognized that it's a problem. So recognition and awareness are the first steps towards recovery. And within that recognition, you need to be recognizing that it is something that is giving you more pain than pleasure, or if it's not you personally, then perhaps it's causing your family more pain than pleasure. So it's not balanced. Okay, so emotional needs then. Some of you might be aware of these already if you're familiar with the Human Givens approach. I'm just going to hold this up for a moment, and hopefully, where is it straight? There we go. Hopefully you can read that. So I'll just go through quickly what they are about. We've got autonomy and control at the top there. So that is about having some sort of sense of control over your life, being in control of not just your own feelings and thoughts, but what's going on around you. I can't do this in reverse, it's challenging me. So as you're looking at these, just try and think of your own life. And so when all of these needs are being met in your life, you cannot experience mental health problems. But it only takes one of those things to be out of sync for you to experience mental health problems. So that's why I want to just go through each one as well and explain what they are. So privacy is about having some time just to take out on your own. It doesn't matter how little or how much it is, but you just need something where you have time to reflect, where it's just you. You're not with your children, you're not with your partners or friends, just you. So that's privacy. Security is about feeling. These are all your own sense of these. So it's not what other people think, it's your own sense of security. Do you feel safe in your family? Do you feel safe at home? Do you feel safe and secure in your job? Do you feel safe and secure in all aspects of your life? So that's security. Community is about, obviously that's quite obvious, quite self-explanatory, but community is about having a sense of community, being part of your community that's not just your own family, being part of something bigger than yourself as well. So some people are religious, so they have a whole church community, and that's part of their overall community. They have the community of being a mum, for instance. If you have young children, there's the whole school community, there's your work community, and then we have hobbies. So that's other ways to obviously get community. So if you do dance classes, there might be a whole part of another community there. So think about if you're getting that one met in your life as well. So we have done autonomy, control, privacy, security, community. So moving down now to status. Status is about your opinion of whether you feel you have some status. Again, that is within your own life, with friends, within your work life. It's about having a sense that you are valued as a person. So when that's lacking, it's very easy to then become low in self-esteem, low in confidence. It has a knock-on effect on your confidence quite quickly, that one. So it's an important one to look at. Attention, that is about receiving and giving attention, so not just one way. You need to be focusing on both attention exchanges and energy exchanges, so that you know if you're receiving a lot of attention and not giving any, then you need to work on that. And likewise, if you're giving lots and not receiving any, that needs to be addressed as well. Sleep is a massive one. I have done a separate live about that one before, because it's a whole nother ball game, that one. But sleep is essential for our mental health, both, well, and physical health as well. But if your sleep is compromised, then everything else is going to be affected. Sorry, I've got something in my teeth. If you want more info on sleep, then please message me, because it's kind of, I don't really have time to go into that now when I'm talking about addictions. So food and drink, like sleep, it's another physical need as well, and it kind of is self-explanatory. We need food, drink and sleep to survive. Movement, in addition to the previous two, it's another physical need. If we just sit sedentary all day, don't do anything, we're going to experience problems both mentally and physically. We need movement, and it releases dopamine, it releases feel-good hormones. So it's all of these are equally important, but for me, the physical ones are also, I think it's easier to focus on those ones when you kind of understand them physically. Emotional connection, that is about having one person, or at least one person in the world, that you feel completely open with, that you can share everything. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a romantic relationship or a partner, but you need to have that with at least one person. So it might be a family member, it could be a best friend, but just somebody who accepts you for who you are and you can be completely open with. And then just coming up to competence and achievement, that's again about your own sense of competence and achievement in your life. So whether that be in your home life or work, you need to be feeling like you're achieving something to have that sort of self-esteem and confidence. Because if you're lacking that, if you don't feel you're achieving anything, then where's that sense of confidence going to come from? It's going to be difficult. And finally, meaning and purpose. Last but not least, this is one of the most important ones, I feel, because without meaning and purpose in your life, then what do you feel you've got to live for? You need to be getting up every day with some meaning and purpose in your life. For parents, this is quite easy, because the fact that you are a parent is a reason to get up in the morning. You have something to live for. But you can get meaning from other things. If you're not a parent, if you don't have a partner, you can gain meaning from other things in your life. So look at things that stretch you. So not things that are a massive challenge, but things that stretch you, things that create some sort of understanding of the fact that there is a bigger world out there apart from yourself. Doing things for others, like volunteering, doing charity work, those are the kind of things that give you meaning in your life as well. So that's the emotional needs. Anybody got any questions on those before I explain a bit more about addictions then? Okay, so the reason I've gone through these now is because, as I've said, all of these have to be met in balance for you to be healthy. So as soon as any of these start disappearing in your life, you can experience, or you can become vulnerable to addiction. And as I've said, that can be anything from being addicted to social media, being addicted to your phone. You might be addicted to a certain type of food. You might be addicted to alcohol or drugs. You might be addicted to gambling. They're all harmful addictions, but there's so many different types, and there's so many different levels of addiction as well. So I just wanted to show you this graph now, if you can see it. I've just drawn this to kind of show you. A colleague of mine put this together to talk to people about their addictions. And so if you could ask yourself this question: how much pleasure do you seek in life? And just see where you might put yourself on that scale. So obviously around 50 in the middle would be kind of what you might say is a normal range. If you don't seek any pleasure in your life, then that's equally as sort of not dangerous, but it's equally as uncommon as the other extreme. I've not really explained that very well. So what I mean is, the middle is desirable. If you have no pleasure, then that could be seen as undesirable. And if you have too much, then obviously that is undesirable, because you're not focusing on any of your emotional needs at all. You're actually just kind of almost becoming selfish and self-obsessed by the addiction. So just have a little think, where would you put yourself on that scale? trying to think where I would put myself now, and it's probably somewhere, I think previously it would have been between 50 and 100, whereas now I would say I'm about there. So substance abuse and addictions is all about pleasure. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's really important to discuss or to think about the relationship between pleasure and pain, because it's very easy when you've got an addiction to forget about the pain that it causes, forget about all the harmful things associated with it, because you're physically gaining pleasure from doing that activity. You think, and your brain thinks, it must be good for me. You know, your sort of primitive brain is getting positive feedback from doing that activity. And so how then are you expected to not do that if your brain's telling you it's good? You know, it's only your conscious rational brain, which comes in after, that's the bit that's going to say, well, actually you shouldn't be doing that because it's bad for you. You know, we know that smoking's bad for us, we know drinking's bad for us, but we do it. Why? This is to do with something called the carrot stick principle. I'm just going to read to you a section here from the Human Givens book. It's like a Bible of Human Givens psychotherapy. But they've got a little section here about the carrot stick principle, which is directly related to addiction. So when I just asked, you know, why do people willingly indulge in self-destructive behaviour? Hopefully this will explain a little bit about it. So this carrots and stick effect is built into all life forms, and which is nature's way of motivating us to seek meaningful activities and thereby learn. So it's something that we need, and that's why we have it. However, this mechanism can be hijacked by addictive behaviour. So the mechanism works like this. When we engage in any experience or activity that is challenging and that we learn from, the brain provides the experience of pleasure. The reward, or the carrot, spurs us on to repeat and become more proficient at whatever it is, giving enjoyment to what we are learning and encouraging mastery through practice. In this way, we are helped to meet one of our fundamental needs, the need for purpose or meaning, as I mentioned earlier. However, the brain doesn't continue to provide the same amount of pleasure every time we repeat that experience or activity. Otherwise, we would not move on to seek yet more challenging experiences or learning situations. We would just keep doing what we could do well. For the sake of evolution, there has to be a way to encourage creatures to keep stretching themselves, to explore and experience differences, learn and develop new skills, so that they can adapt to environmental changes. So once we've mastered some new experience, the brain then turns down the reward and the pleasure begins to lessen. But we miss that pleasure and crave to experience it again, suffering, in effect, withdrawal symptoms. We can stop feeling the pain and start feeling the pleasure again if we proceed to challenge ourselves further in the same or a different field. So the withdrawal symptoms serve, in effect, as a stick to drive us on. Whenever we need to keep on doing whatever it is we have learned to do, it is no longer so pleasurable. Then the withdrawal symptoms serve as a stick. If we stop, for instance, if an overweight man decides to start taking regular exercise for the sake of his health, he may start walking a mile each day and initially derive enormous pleasure from becoming more fit. After a while, though, it starts to become a boring routine experience. He doesn't get quite the same amount of pleasure out of doing it. On wet days, he's tempted to stay in front of the television, and yet, if he does, something feels wrong. He feels guilty and uncomfortable, slobbing out in the evening, knowing how much better it will be for his body if he takes his usual walk. Feeling bad or empty, or that something is missing, is the stick that the brain uses to goad us into maintaining worthwhile behaviours. Different brain chemicals help us to maintain what we have achieved, while at the same time motivating us to stretch ourselves in ways that further our development. It is a wonderful mechanism that enables all life forms, from single-celled creatures and organisms upwards, to progress. Now, I'm sorry about reading from this, but there's no better way to explain this than the way that the Human Givens have written it. So just bear with me while I just finish this paragraph and then back to the discussion. So that's the carrot stick principle. However, in addiction, this process goes disastrously wrong. This is because when we ingest a pleasure-inducing addictive chemical, it hijacks the receptors designed for the chemicals that the brain uses for rewarding us and making us feel good when we make an effort. So when we pump them in from outside, the same pleasurable feelings are released in the brain. However, if we keep taking the drug in search to re-experience that high, the mechanism that we have just described kicks in and cancels out that pleasure. Then, if we want more pleasure, we have to increase the dosage of the drug or whatever the addiction is. So we have to then increase the dosage. But if we then stop taking the drug at any point, the stick comes into use, we suffer withdrawal symptoms. We can only be assuaged, we think, by taking more of the drug, more and more and more. However, in keeping with the valuable principle of utilization, we can actually make effective use of this very same human given. The brain mechanism of the carrot and stick event in the curing of people with addictions. So there we go. I've explained that because it is fundamentally the main part in that we would use to cure addictions and to help people treating with addictions. But it's useful for you to know that background, because it kind of helps you understand why your brain works in the way it does, and why, as I've said, we can continue to sort of engage in harmful behaviors when we know they're harmful. So hopefully that is all making sense so far. I'm just going to quickly talk to you now about the sort of things that you can do about it. If you do have an addiction or know somebody with an addiction, then we need to focus on helping that. So similar to the emotional needs, I've just done a little scruffy diagram about our innate resources. So these are things that you have been born with that help you get your needs met. So if you're looking at these and thinking, well, that's all very well showing me those, but how do I help? This is where these come in. So your innate resources are actually evolutionary designs to get your needs met. So imagination, I'll start with that one because everyone knows what that is, hopefully. Your imagination can be a very, very positive and powerful tool. But when it comes to things like mental illness, we find that people are using their imagination in the wrong way. Dreaming, again, it's an innate resource. It's a positive thing that should be used positively. It's part of your overall sort of well-being. But when you're doing too much dreaming, as I've mentioned in a previous live, you then wake up exhausted and it can become quite a vicious cycle. A conscious, rational mind, that is about being able to access or keep the access open to the thinking part of your brain, which is what shuts off when you're emotional. And likewise, if you're in that sort of zone where you're experiencing an addiction, when you're actually acting in that moment, the thinking, this part of your brain is shut off. So there are exercises and things that I can teach you to do which allow you to still be able to use that, and use it in the right way. The observing self, I've mentioned in a few of my lives before, so some of you might know what that is, but it's basically a term for perspective. Being able to, I like to explain it as if you're coming out of your body and you're looking down on yourself. So you're observing you and everything around you. So it's about giving yourself a bit of perspective and looking at things from other points of view. Rapport building, that's just simply about the sort of the resource or the ability to create relationships and connections with people. That's a really positive tool. And so if you're spending a lot of time on your own, engaging in whatever activity it is that might be related to your addiction or any other mental health issue, you're not going to be exercising your rapport building skills. So that is something you need to do for you as a human being. It's part of what makes you function. And long-term memory, that's self-explanatory, but the reason it's a resource is because we learn from mistakes and we learn from previous experiences. Use your long-term memory to your advantage. Remember things that you used to enjoy, things that you did before, perhaps before you had an addiction, if you do have an addiction. Use it to remind yourself what were things like before you had to rely on that. And understanding the world through metaphor. This one is about basically what we learn in the Human Givens is that the brain kind of learns everything through metaphor. Human beings are very, very complex with their metaphors, so you can use that to your advantage when you're thinking about things like pattern matching, which I've explained in other lives. So just remember that we understand the world through metaphor, and that is a positive thing. So using it as a resource will help you get all these other innate resources on track and start using them. I hope that makes sense. Please ask any questions if it doesn't. And finally, to just give you some tips to take away, prevention, especially with addiction, prevention is better than cure. So even if you're watching this live and you haven't got an addiction, then please still go away and do the things that I have talked about, because once you get an addiction or any other mental illness, once it's there, it's difficult to get rid of. So if we can prevent these things from happening, then that's going to be a lot easier. So I've put number 1 there: do more, think less. And what I mean by that is do more of the things that get you out of your sort of your own thoughts. So if if you're not doing anything or not doing a lot, you need to get out. You need to do things that stretch yourself, do things that are creative, things where you're not on your own, for instance, doing exercise, releasing dopamine. And if you're going outside, then you're going to be getting serotonin from the sun, which is a happy hormone. So doing more of the things that you know are good for you and doing less of the things that you know are not so good for you. And the second one I put on there is a little anagram. I love my anagrams. An anagram called STOP. So if you're doing these if you stop doing these things, then you're going to be, again, just increasing your resilience and reducing your risk of becoming addicted to something. So scoring points, what that means is stop comparing yourself to other people or trying to be one better than another person. Stop thinking the worst. That's not helpful. That's only going to make you feel worse. Stop opting out. So if you don't ever say yes to accepting help, for instance, if you don't ever say yes to going out with your friends, then challenge yourself to change that today. So stop saying no and opting out. say yes for a change. And stop putting down. So that's putting yourself down and putting other people down. Stop doing all of those things right now. And number three, reduce blame and accept imperfections. Blame is massive with addictions. People love to blame an addiction for things that have gone wrong within their life, but actually you are the only person to blame in that. I don't mean to sound harsh, but that the reality is that you only have yourself to blame if you have an addiction, not the substance or other people. And you can't blame other people for you becoming addicted to something, because your emotional needs are within your control only, nobody else's. Yes, things happen in life, like somebody dies, or a partner leaves you, and that can make you more at risk of an addiction, but you are still in control. You don't become addicted to a substance because of them. It's because of your response to those events. I hope that makes sense. And accept imperfections. So, especially with addictions, it's very kind of easy, or you might think it's easy to say, "Oh, just don't worry about your imperfections." No, that doesn't make sense. Sorry, that's not what I meant to say. I've put imperfections next to blame because I feel that, self-blame is kind of born out of feeling guilty or feeling bad about the fact that there might be some imperfections. You're not a perfect person, and nobody is, and that's okay. The sooner that you can accept that and acknowledge that, the better. So don't blame yourself for things that might have gone wrong, or things that you are currently doing, because it's not helpful. What you can put your energy into doing instead is changing that. So there's no point in having this kind of guilt or blame. All it does is kind of magnifies, and it makes the problem worse. And finally, be realistic. If you do have an addiction, or somebody with quite a serious addiction, you need to be realistic with them and be sympathetic, because this is not going to just go away overnight. It's going to take a lot of work and energy and investment. So don't suddenly say to them or yourself, "Right, that's it, I'm not going to drink tomorrow." That's not realistic if you have a drinking problem. What is realistic is saying, "I'm going to have one less drink than I would normally have." Or if it's a screen addiction, let's say social media addiction, and a child is spending 5 hours a day on social media, a realistic goal would be to spend 4.5 hours instead of 5. Okay, because when you make these goals too big, you're just going to increase your chances of a relapse, and you're actually setting yourself up to fail. If you're setting yourself something that's not realistic, then it's going to have a knock-on effect on your confidence, because you'll think that you failed when actually it was just an outrageous goal anyway. So there's a little anagram that we use when we're setting goals in therapy, and it's called PAN. So PAN for gold. Your goal has to be all of these three things. It needs to be positive, it needs to be achievable, and it needs to be related to your emotional needs. So if a goal isn't positive, then it shouldn't be a goal. An example of that is, you shouldn't be saying to yourself, "Right, I can't even think of a negative one." That's probably a good thing. But just remember that. So PAN for gold. I can always put it in the comments after if anyone wants to access it. And so I'll just quickly show you the emotional needs again so that you can perhaps note them down if you haven't already got them. These are the fundamental things that you need to be working on. And I think there's 9 of them that are sort of emotional, if you like, and then there's 3 that are more physical. So the movement, food and sleep are more physical. And that's pretty much it for addictions. So just check that I've covered everything in my notes. Yep, just to remember that the first step is recognizing there's a problem. Once you've done that, then you can actually accept help and you will be receptive to that help. So it's no good sending somebody to therapy if they don't think they've got a problem or if they don't want to get better. Unfortunately, with addiction, it is quite a selfish illness in that, you know, you don't realize how it's impacting on other people, and you don't necessarily want to get better because you're gaining pleasure from doing that activity. So it's a tricky one, but it can be treated as long as the person wants to get better or wants to address their problem. Any questions before I go? I can hear my little one running about on the landing, so she's obviously not having her nap. Okay, you can always ask me questions after, but thank you those of you that have watched now. I'd love for people to share it or watch it in replay. If you know anyone that might find it interesting or useful, then please do share. Thank you guys. Enjoy the snow. Bye.